Very good. Well, this morning we started by talking about how to plan for success and laid out some ideas around being engaged in your work and understanding what your strengths are and preparing across your well-being, just to see how much you retained. Anybody remember what the 5 areas of well-being were? Anybody have one of those in mind? Yeah. Community well-being, yep. There were 4 more. Social, yeah. Physical. Purpose, physical. Nobody wants to talk about financial. So I know it was awkward before because I referenced banking and loans, and that you might have been sitting next to the person who signs the other line on your form. So I didn't mean to make anybody nervous there. But so we're going to wrap up by just kind of sharing a couple other highlights and really just send you on your way tonight. I want to start though with the Gallup Poll, because that's what we do. So I just want you to think about, we talk a lot about leadership within Farm Bureau, and one of the things I know there was encouragement about over lunch today was even to think about how to get involved in the local Farm Bureau chapter in a leadership role, and in your community in a leadership role. So at Gallup, we study success. We think about what's right with people and study their strengths. But when we study leadership, we don't study failures in leadership and figure out how to avoid failure as if that's success. We study success and think about how do we replicate that. So as we talk to leaders about leadership, I really want to ask this question of you, and we've asked this on a Gallup poll many times before. I want you to take just a moment and think about the leader who's had the most positive influence on your life. And it's somebody who you know, I mean somebody close to you, not some composite of a bunch of leaders or a book you read or that kind of thing, but think about an actual person that you've known, that you followed in some way, whether it was a leader in your community, a leader in your organization, whatever it was. Think about that person, and then I want you to just think to yourself, jot it down if you need to, but just 3 words that stand out as you think about what this person best contributes to your life, what contribution they've actually made. So jot down just a couple of words or get those top of mind, and I'm gonna collect a few responses. So let me give you just a moment to do that. Real quick here, just give you just another minute. Just jot down the word or phrase, the couple of words that really stand out as you think about what that person best contributes to your life. Okay, we won't go through the whole biography of the leader and how you know them and what they really, you know, how you interacted throughout your life. But if you would, just shout out a few of those words that come top of mind. And as I kind of collect some data here on this little survey, what's a word that stands out when you think about the best leader you've ever known, what they've contributed? Say again? Values, yeah. Work ethic. Loyal. Positive, positivity, that was honesty, yeah.
Like a forward-thinking mindset.
Forward-thinking mindset, what was that? Listens, yeah, sorry. Ironically, I didn't hear you when you said that the first time, but anyway. Dedication, good. Couple more. Determination. Generous.
Inclusion.
Wisdom, inclusion. Support. If we do this long enough, you're going to hit all of them. So when we did this Gallup poll, we asked more than 10,000 people on a web survey, random sample across the country. We've replicated this in other cultures as well. And when we sorted across over 10,000 responses and did what we call factor analysis, where we kind of clustered like responses together, there were 4 things that sorted pretty clearly to the top. And I'm going to share those with you now. As we go through this, as you're all in leadership roles in your community and your family and your business, I'd love for you to do a little self-evaluation and think about how well are you doing in creating these things for those who look to you for leadership. So the first one is trust. And some of the words there, honesty, integrity, respect, we hit at least a couple of those. It's hard to follow a leader that you don't trust or that you don't believe has integrity. You need to kind of know where they're coming from, and you might not always agree with them, but there's an integrity. Even if you are on opposite sides of an issue, you can tell there's some values, there's some honesty that's involved there. So that's the first one. The second one is compassion. And if we're being honest, the word that showed up more often was actually love. Friendship, love, caring, happiness, compassion. So it's somebody who you really just admire and who you really, you have a strong relational connection to. Earlier in engagement, we talked about having a best friend at work. But it's somebody who you really have that deep admiration for. The people we follow and those who follow you are really looking for that depth of relationship and knowing that they're cared about. So the third is stability, strength, security, support, peace. Some of those were mentioned as well. We need to know where our leaders are coming from. And ideally, we can spot some patterns as we study them over time and really start to make sense out of seeing, again, you don't always necessarily agree with them, but it doesn't surprise you all the time when they make a decision. You start to notice some consistency and some pattern that's worth getting behind, so stability. And then the final one is hope. Hope is a belief that the future is going to be better than the present and that you have the power it takes to get you there. So optimism is wishful thinking about the future, but hope includes this agency or this belief that you're an agent about that and you kind of control your own destiny and you're going to put in the work it takes to get you there. So compassion, trust, hope, and stability are those four big themes that really stand out in our leadership survey, and I'd encourage you to think about those four in the leadership roles that you play in your community and your organization. Your followers, whether they would use those same words or not, are most likely kind of coding your behaviors and your actions and looking for those things in you as well. So as we think about finishing strong and achieving success, I think those four words are ones that ought to sort to the top. So I know Senator Fisher was going to be here today, and based on the circumstances in Washington right now, she's not. This next little idea that I wanted to share with you actually comes out of I started thinking about it when I read Ben Sass's book. He's got a new book out called The Vanishing American Adult. I don't know, anybody come across that book yet? It's done real well. I don't agree with every policy stance that he's always taken. I doubt that you do either. That's part of our system, is we debate ideas and decide how we want to feel about certain things. But really, it's not a political book, and before he was involved in the Senate, he was an educator, was involved as a president of Midland University. Before that was a history teacher. And one of the things that he talks about in this book is that, every 50 years or so, there's an idea that comes along that changes the way that we work and live and interact with one another. So he didn't say it in exactly this way, but I want to give him credit for kind of starting this conversation in my head at least. So I'm not a historian. I go back to I probably passed the classes because I studied for the test, but that's not been my calling in life, to study history. So I'm not going to go back all the way, but we'll go back to 1865. At the end of the Civil War, most of our country lived in rural parts of the country. So most people, over 85% of people, lived on farms in rural communities. Over those next 50 or so years, the assembly line kind of started to become a thing. So I know there's Ford fans and there's Chevy fans, and we're not going to debate which company is better, but you might do that tonight. But Henry Ford and certainly that group was targeted and given a lot of credit for coming up with the idea of the assembly line. So how can we mass produce things and do it in efficient ways? So that was great. Well, 50 or 60 years later, Deming and Duran and some other people came along and said, we're producing a lot of stuff, but somewhere along the lines of 30% of the things we produce in factories is defective. And that's not very good. So we need to figure out how can we reduce variance, how can we reduce defects in our manufacturing process. So we started coming up with factories and putting people together like that. Well, all of a sudden our society started to change with that as well. Why? Well, people started to move to cities and started to live closer together. So instead of being in relationship with the guy or the gal down the road from you, that was kind of proximity as a major factor in why you might have gotten together, all of a sudden you live down the block from somebody from Poland and somebody from France and somebody from Germany and somebody from the coast or whatever. And so our society changed as people started to interact with people different than themselves. So that happened, and then we started to get the assembly line, then we got the total quality management, Deming and Duran's work. We started to increase not just the production, but the quality. So fast forward to today, another maybe 40 or so years later, and we're seeing all kinds of trends again. We're seeing big changes in technology. We're seeing millennials entering the workplace in big numbers, and to the point where today, there's 73 million millennials in the workplace. That's about 38% of our U.S. workforce fall into this range where their birthday is somewhere between 1980 and 1996. So full disclosure, I missed the cutoff by a couple of years, so I don't get to count that. But as we discuss what is really true about millennials, I would probably argue that many of us are looking for those kind of things, that millennials and their mindset is largely changing the way that we interact with one another across the board. But sometimes millennial is a dirty word. At lunch, a few of us sat together and I asked the question, what really stands out as you think about millennials? And they kind of apologized for some of the things. They said, I don't even like to be called a millennial because of the bad rap that they have, the way people talk about them. What are some of the things, I'd love to hear just a few, when you hear the word millennial, what stands out? What do you think of right top of the mind? No drive, they're lazy, yeah, what else? I'm not agreeing with that, but I'm agreeing that's something we hear, yeah. Entitled. Soft.
Snowflake.
What's that?
Snowflake.
Snowflake. Job hopper. Live beyond their means. Yeah, I want to move into a house the same size as my parents, even though they took 30 years to get there, right? They should be given what?
They think they should be given to them.
Yeah, they should think it should be given to them, maybe entitled.
Open-minded.
Open-minded. Thank you for a positive one. Yes, there's some of that too. Yeah, they're open to different ideas and yeah.
Social media.
Social media, yeah, technology. They've never known a world without, I mean, they grew up with iPads in their crib or with, you know, with cell phones that were more than phones, right? No flip phones or BlackBerries. That was not even a thing, right? Purpose, yeah. There's a different mindset around purpose and how my work and my life intersect. A couple more. Independent, yeah. Yeah, willing to take on challenges and be independent. The gig economy, you hear about where people bounce from one gig to another and they're kind of comfortable with that rather than a previous generation that might have said, I'm going to do the same thing for 30 years, retire, get a watch, and sit on the porch and enjoy my grandkids the rest of my life. So good, bad, or otherwise, there's a lot of reputation that comes with the word millennials. And a lot's been written about them and thought about them. We act like it's this coming phenomenon. Part of my work at Gallup is to study what school superintendents think. So we asked over 2,000 school superintendents that we gave them a statement that said, our school district is prepared for millennials entering the workforce. We asked them that this last year. Only 6% of school superintendents strongly agree that they're ready for millennials to enter the workplace. Newsflash, for the last 15 years, almost every new teacher that they've hired is a millennial. So we're kind of behind the curve on some of this conversation. So some of the things we've learned, and we've got an entire report on our Gallup website. If you're interested, you can download for free like a 50-page report. Not this afternoon necessarily. You've learned a lot today already. But for later, that's available. But a couple of the highlights. We know the millennials want certain things from their manager, from their leader, from their organization. They want clear goals and expectations and priorities. This is a big one. They want coaching. If there's one word that might stand out, it's this coaching mindset is this thing we're seeing. It's not just an exchange relationship where you're my boss and you tell me what to do, but you're my coach who comes alongside me and helps me get it done. And they're looking forward to regular feedback. The annual evaluation, it may be necessary, but it's not sufficient. You know, they want regular interaction about how things are going, not because they're insecure, but because they really care and they really want to know where things are headed. They want constant communication and feedback. Now, some people are not, the other half of our table at lunch would be on the other side of things, not necessarily millennials, probably twice the age of the millennials at the table. And so we started talking about, what about when a millennial reports to somebody who's not? Right? And the older person or their manager says, well, you know, the way we've always done it is whatever. Well, that mindset is, you know, you can be get off my lawn guy if you want to, but you're kind of outnumbered at this point. So pretty helpful to be aware of what the workplace is really looking for to remain competitive. And they want accountability. They're not snowflakes. They're not shirking responsibility. They really want to be held accountable, and they want to know how they're doing, not because they're insecure, but because they really care. So I think we're probably too negative about millennials in general about that. So I use the word coaching. When you say a millennial needs a coach or wants a coach and desires coaching, what is a coach? It's someone who understands how you're individually motivated. They individualize to you. It's not just that they lay it out and say, here's what we expect and you have to do it and here's how to do it and report back to me when it's done. It's this mindset. So Henry Ford kind of famously quoted for everything. Yogi Berra and Henry Ford and Albert Einstein, I think all they did was give quotes for us to recite later. But one of the things that Henry Ford allegedly said was, how come every time I need a pair of hands, there's a person attached? Like the mindset back 50, 100 years ago when we're talking about factories and production was, how can we program a human to do what eventually maybe a machine can do? Great managers, great coaches understand that we're all wired a little bit differently, and the way we get to success is identifying what your talents are, what motivates you, and then setting things up that way. They enable optimal performance. They set a high bar. We ask a question on a selection interview we do at Gallup. Who sets higher expectations for your performance, you or your manager? And what we're listening for in their response is, I do. And in almost every case, if a manager would just say to their employees, how good can you be? How much do you think you can produce this year? What do you think your sales goal ought to be? What kind of numbers do you think you'll hit this year? The individual employee would generally set goals higher than their manager. Well, what happens if the manager doesn't ask and just sets the goal on their own? Well, all of a sudden it's the manager's goal, not the employee's goal, so we're lacking buy-in and engagement. but also the goal's probably not as high as if it would have been a collaborative conversation. So if you manage a team and you're coming up on goal setting or thinking about progress reviews, ask them how good they can be and how much they can produce. I'm pretty sure their bar for themselves would be at least as high, and then how do you coach them to that level of performance? But they individualize expectations. They encourage personal and professional success, and they remove barriers to high performance. If you have people who report to you or who look to you for leadership, maybe every week you ought to have a 5-minute conversation that says, what are your goals for this week and how can I help? How can I help remove barriers to you being successful this week? And I know not everybody's in an environment where you have a group of people who report to you as a manager or employee kind of relationship, but to the extent that's true, as a leader, as a manager, removing barriers that will hold back their performance might be the most important thing you can do. So that's kind of the mindset about coaching. Just to put it all on one page and kind of summarize some of the major changes we've observed in the workforce, and this is not just attributed to millennials, but certainly as that generation is now the largest generation in the workforce, many of this mindset has kind of come in over these last few years. And we've touched on this a little bit throughout the day, so it might be kind of a summary of some of the key takeaways. It's not just about my paycheck, it's about my purpose. Now, at Gallup, they pay me twice a month, and if they ever stopped doing that, I'd probably not love my job as much as I do right now. So I want to make sure that, that they continue to pay me. But if somebody else called me up today and said, hey, Tim, I saw you at that conference, or I heard about your work, I'd like to hire you. I don't know what Gallup's paying you, but I'll give you $1 more or some amount more. Well, are you interested? I'm not listening. I don't care. I mean, I'm not listening for just $1 more or whatever. I care about, is my purpose being met? And it would be hard for me to find a job that I love as much as what I get to do right now. Maybe it's out there, but I'm kind of enjoying what I do. I hope that shows. It's not just about your role, but it's about your development. Not just your job description, but how can I grow? I'm working on an article right now about why teachers leave the profession. And everybody thinks teachers quit because of pay and benefits. Teachers are actually about half as likely to quit because of pay and benefits, and when we look at their data relative to other professions. Other companies, other organizations lose people because of pay and benefits. People don't quit teaching just because of that. Now, if we could raise teacher salaries, that'd be great, but that's not why they're leaving. Why are they leaving? 60% of them say it's because they don't see a path towards development. They don't want to be in the same role for 30 years with no opportunities to grow. And some of them don't want to be a principal either. They want to get better and better at their craft as a teacher. So we've got to figure out how can we help people grow within the role, not just because, or not out of the role and out of the company. Somebody said millennials are job hoppers. 93% of millennials say the last time they changed roles, they had to leave their company to do so. So we've got to think about ways to help people grow within our organizations, or it's going to be a revolving door and turnover is expensive. The third one up there is the transition from just tell me what I need to fix to tell me what I do well, or tell me about my strengths. And we've talked about that a little bit today as far as identify your strengths and manage to that. Not just wanting to have a boss or a leader, but wanting to have somebody who comes alongside us as a coach. And that might be a big takeaway for you is how can we be more like a coach to our team members? If you think about the athletic model, a coach is kind of shouting out plays from the sideline. Maybe it's basketball season. So you got basketball coach, they're calling out plays from the sideline. They're encouraging. They do quick timeouts and quick huddles. They have a halftime and kind of recalibrate. Then they do the same thing in the second half. They debrief after the game, and then they start planning for the next opponent. If you kind of take that metaphor and play it out in terms of how you interact with your team, probably pretty helpful for the future. And then I mentioned it's not enough just to do an annual review, but we've got to be having ongoing conversations about our performance. Again, the coach doesn't just come back at the end of the season and say, here's how everybody graded out this year. They're constantly shouting out from the sideline what needs to happen and encouraging and corrective behaviors and all that. And then the last one is it's not enough just to have a job, but it's this integration with my life. There was a time when people would say work-life balance is the key, and you should only think about work when you're at the office. Don't get distracted by personal things. And when you're home, don't think about work, shut off work, leave it at the office, that kind of thing. Most of us are in careers now where there is no off button and on button necessarily. It's a Saturday and you're all at work right now, right? So there's a good example. And probably throughout the day today, you've checked in on things with family. And so we don't have that work-life balance. It's more work-life integration. So rather than keeping score about how many hours you spend at home and how many hours you spend at work, let's make sure we're committed to both. And I don't think that cuts either one short if we do that well. So that's a difference in terms of how we interact with one another. So that might be kind of a summary. The last thing I'll share is just this, this result right here. I know this organization and you all love what you do and advocate for where things are headed with agriculture. So this Gallup poll that we recently did, just back in the summer this last year, we asked over 1,000 people how they feel about all kinds of different industries. By the way, politics comes in dead last on our list most of the time when we ask. We're not real thrilled about what's going on in Washington necessarily, but the closer we get to the action in terms of this, the better. The institution or the industry sector, if you will, that had the biggest growth from 2016 to 2017 is represented right here in this room. So to the extent you're an advocate for agriculture and for the agriculture industry in general, when we asked the question in 2016, 55% said they have either a somewhat positive or very positive view of farming and agriculture. When we asked the question last summer, it was all the way up to 70%. So that number jumped more than any other industry. These are the biggest gainers out of a long list, 20-some different industry sectors that we asked about. So it's right there in the team photo with the computer industry, and there's a couple other industries held in high regard. But so whatever you're doing is working. I know when the markets fluctuate, there's ebb and flow to how positive we feel about how things are going. But just know that Americans across the board are confident about the future of agriculture and appreciate the work that you're doing. So maybe I'll close on a positive note. Thanks for your time throughout the day today. I've really enjoyed opportunities to interact with people throughout the day in the hallways and so on. And best wishes for a successful conclusion to your conference, and enjoy your evening. Thank you.